So when we specifically talk about women and violence, there's a whole literature on violence in films and whether that affects people being more violent or thinking about violence in a different way. But specifically, when we talk about gender and violence, we're talking about it in a couple of ways. The most important, or probably the deepest connection with society and violence, is going to be the idea of violence against women that is sexualized. So you'll hear a lot of argumentation that, particularly in modern media, that the violence is going to be equal. You're going to see as many men die as you see women. They're going to be beat up in the same amount of times. However, you don't see the men sexualized in their violence. So if you think of the James Bond films, he doesn't have sex with the spies before he gets information out of them when they're men. He does do that for the women. So they may die in equal times, but they are much more connected with sex, rape, violence, and romance. A lot of the times you'll see films, it's a very common film trope, to have a man stand up for a woman who is being sexually harassed or is threatened with violence, and at that point they are crying, they are comforted, and then this will lead to a romantic relationship or a sexual relationship. And if you think about people who model their behavior on these things, like what is a romance supposed to be, particularly younger viewers, what is a romance supposed to be like? There is this idea that a woman is somebody who needs to be protected, is a fragile thing, is going to be attacked, and that if you protect her, there is an implicit idea there that she belongs to you. That you say you cannot kiss this woman, you cannot have sex with this woman because I have claimed her by protecting her, and as her protector, I can kiss this woman. So there is this idea of sexualizing violence and sexualizing violence in romance. That can be a really insidious way that violence plays into women. But then there's also more subtle ways that violence is there. One of the symbolic violences is that women don't appear in films as much as men do. So it's about 3-to-1 ratio. You'll see 3 men to every 1 woman that you see. And this is really difficult for women to find characters in films that they identify with, or films in general that they feel like they are really represented in. There's such a thing as like the Scully effect, the idea that in the X-Files there was a character named Scully who was a woman. She was very interested in science, and after X-Files came out, there was a generation that went into STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math. A generation of women who would directly say, I went into this because I saw Scully. So this is, just a representation of women in itself can be a form of violence towards women. The final kind of violence towards women would be in having women be the motivator for the plot, particularly violence towards them. So it's called fridging, or women in refrigerators. This idea came out based on a comic book, I think it was The Green Lantern, where the Green Lantern comes back to his happy home, his partner, and he finds her brutalized, murdered, and then stuffed in a refrigerator. Obviously, this is an incredibly brutal death, and this death has story arced him into action. So, movies are never going to be about the day nothing happened. You have to have a motivator. But when you do have, particularly in modern films, you will have this first 5 minutes of representing a full-blown female character. Someone who you hint at has a lot of education, has an interesting job, is charismatic, is kind, is a mother, has a household, has an entire life. The first 5 minutes you have that, and then the second 5 minutes she brutally dies. So that, first of all, robs the female audience of having a character that they could have identified with. Second of all, it shows the male audience, again, these women are fragile. If you have someone that you love, you have to protect her, but you also, if you're not there, have to lock her up. She is in constant danger. And then the idea of having an adventure after she's dead that is about revenge or is about coming to terms with her death there is an element of that where instead of having like the emotional intelligence of being with a woman, if she's hospitalized after a brutalization, taking care of the people that she cared for, taking care of the home and the responsibilities that she can no longer take care of but that she loves, that would be the emotionally intelligent answer to a brutalization. Instead, in film, we want to go on the adventure. So there will be an international, revenge spree for the man where he goes off and finds all these people to beat up because they had caused her harm. That kind of representation really gives particularly impressionable minds the idea of what you do to care for someone in a relationship if they are brutalized. It is not to stay and care for them, but it is rather to go off on this adventure on your own, and then maybe you reunite with this now healing woman, but she is not really a character. That kind of plot device has a lot of insidious characterizations in it. So in Violence in Women, you have to think about the first things that they're not there, the second thing that they're killed often, and then the third thing that there is this idea of violence being some way tied to a romantic character, which can have really lasting repercussions in how we deal with romance and relationships. Just being aware of it is a huge first step. So there are all kinds of, from the field, from the audience saying, I don't like this, and filmmakers really reacting to that. So things like the Scully effect, there's the Hawkeye representations, which is a very entertaining website. It started off as a Tumblr website by fans where they showed women in comic books in very sexual positions or violent positions, and then they would represent Hawkeye, which is a male character in comic books, in those positions, and to see how ludicrous that would look if he looked like this, that this isn't a powerful comic book character, this is a sexualized comic book character. Just by doing that, the industry started responding to it. So audience members really here are active. They are not passive consumers. They are the ones that are going to say, these are the stories we like. And if they don't like those kind of stories, you can see a lot of fan fiction where they start recreating the characters to look more like them, to have more power in that. Fan fiction is more and more becoming this enormous area of support and change within the industry, where the fans really start recreating any kind of cultural products that they really responded to. So I think definitely the first step is start noticing it. The last movie I started noticing is Fincher's latest movie, The Killer, which will be available on Netflix right now. And this was just the trope of a woman gets hurt and a man goes off to have revenge against her. As soon as you start realizing that's happening, that movie really falls into a certain area of stereotypes instead of being innovative, which is what it's critically acclaimed to be right now. It's not innovative, it's a very, very trodden down path before.